When my daughter Sharon hired a caregiver for me, she said it was because she loved me too much to see me struggle alone. But when I found my heart medication replaced with sugar pills, I realized her love came with a deadly price tag. My name is Margaret Wilson, and I am 72 years old. What I'm about to tell you will chill you to your bones. It's a story about how the person you trust most in this world can become your worst nightmare. How a daughter's love can turn into a murder plot. And how sometimes, the only way to save your life is to suspect everyone around you. 3 years ago, my beloved husband Harold passed away from a sudden heart attack. We had been married for 48 years. Harold was my rock, my companion, my best friend. When he died, I felt like half of my soul had been ripped away. But I was determined to live independently in the beautiful Victorian home we had shared for decades. I had been a registered nurse for 40 years before I retired. I worked in cardiac care at St. Mary's Hospital downtown. I knew how to take care of myself. I knew how to manage my own health conditions. I had mild high blood pressure and a heart rhythm disorder, but both were completely controlled with daily medications. My doctor, Dr. Peterson, had been treating me for 15 years. He always said I was one of his healthiest 70-year-old patients. For 2 years after Harold's death, I managed perfectly well on my own. I cooked my own meals, maintained my garden, drove myself to appointments, and even volunteered at the hospital twice a week. My daughter Sharon would visit occasionally, but she lived across town with her husband Mike and seemed busy with her own life. I understood. She had her own family to worry about. Then about 6 months ago, everything changed. Sharon started visiting me more frequently. At first, I was delighted. I thought maybe she had finally realized how much I missed her father and needed more family time. She would bring groceries, help with household chores, and stay for dinner. We would talk about Harold, about her childhood, about life in general. "Mom," she said one afternoon as we sat in my kitchen drinking tea, "I've been thinking about your situation here. This house is so big for just one person. And you're getting older. What if something happened to you and nobody knew?" "Sharon, I'm fine," I told her. "I have my neighbors. I have my medical alert bracelet. Dr. Peterson says I'm in excellent health for my age." "But Mom, you're 72. Things can change so quickly at your age. Harold's heart attack came out of nowhere, didn't it?" The mention of Harold's sudden death always made me emotional. Sharon knew that. She knew exactly which buttons to push to make me feel vulnerable and scared. "What are you suggesting, dear?" "I think we should look into getting you some help around the house. Maybe a companion. Someone who could check on you, help with meals, make sure you're taking your medications correctly." "I take my medications perfectly fine, Sharon. I was a nurse, remember?" "I know, Mom. But wouldn't it be nice to have some company? Someone to talk to during the day? Someone who could drive you places, so you don't have to worry about driving at night." I wasn't entirely convinced, but Sharon was persistent. Over the next few weeks, she brought up the topic again and again. She found articles online about elderly people who had fallen in their homes and weren't discovered for days. She told me stories about neighbors whose parents had been scammed by strangers because they were lonely and trusting. Slowly, she wore down my resistance. "I found someone," she announced one morning when she stopped by unexpectedly. "Her name is Carla Johnson. She's a certified nursing assistant with excellent references. She specializes in caring for elderly clients in their own homes." "Sharon, I really don't think I need." "Mom, please. Just meet with her. If you don't like her, we'll look for someone else. But I would feel so much better knowing someone was checking on you regularly." 2 days later, Sharon brought Carla to meet me. Carla Johnson appeared to be in her mid-30s, with short brown hair and a professional demeanor. She wore medical scrubs and carried a leather bag that looked like a nurse's kit. She spoke confidently about her experience caring for elderly clients. She mentioned specific medical conditions and treatments. She seemed to know what she was talking about. "Mrs. Wilson," she said in a warm, caring voice, "I understand you have some concerns about having help in your home. That's completely natural. Many of my clients felt the same way at first. But I want you to know that my job is simply to support you in living independently. I'm here to assist you, not to take over your life." She seemed so genuine, so professional. Sharon was sitting right there, nodding and smiling, obviously pleased with her choice. "What exactly would you do?" I asked. "Whatever you need, Mrs. Wilson. I can help with meal preparation, light housekeeping, medication reminders, transportation to appointments. I can be here as much or as little as you'd like. We can start with just a few hours a day and see how it goes." Against my better judgment, I agreed to a trial period. That was the beginning of the nightmare. Carla started coming to my house 3 days a week for 4 hours each day. At first, everything seemed fine. She was helpful, pleasant, and respectful. She prepared healthy meals, organized my medications in a weekly pill dispenser, and drove me to my doctor's appointments. But then I started noticing small things that didn't seem quite right. Carla was extremely interested in my financial situation. She asked detailed questions about my bank accounts, my insurance policies, my monthly expenses. When I mentioned that Harold had left me very comfortable financially, her eyes seemed to light up with interest. She also asked a lot of questions about my family relationships. How often did Sharon visit? Did I have other relatives who checked on me? Who had keys to my house? Who would be my emergency contact if something happened? Most disturbing of all, she seemed unusually interested in my medications. "Mrs. Wilson," she said one afternoon, "I notice you take several heart medications. Are you sure you're taking the right dosages? Sometimes doctors overprescribe for elderly patients." "Dr. Peterson has been managing my medications for years," I told her. "Everything is carefully monitored." Of course. I just want to make sure you're not experiencing any side effects. Have you been feeling dizzy lately? Nauseous? More tired than usual?" The truth was, I had been feeling a bit off lately. Nothing serious, just some fatigue and occasional dizziness. I had assumed it was normal aging combined with grief over Harold's death. "Maybe a little," I admitted. "You know, Mrs. Wilson, sometimes these medications can build up in your system over time. Your body chemistry changes as you get older. What worked 5 years ago might not be appropriate now." That evening, after Carla left, I decided to check my medication bottle more carefully. Carla kept giving me the wrong medications, claiming they were new prescriptions from my doctor. But I used to be a nurse for 40 years. I knew exactly what she was trying to do to me. The first thing I noticed was that my heart medication looked different. The pills were slightly smaller and had a different shape than usual. When I questioned Carla about it, she had a ready explanation. "Oh, Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Peterson switched you to a generic version of the same medication. It's exactly the same drug, just made by a different company. Generic medications look different, but work the same way. The doctor said it would save you money." That sounded reasonable. I had heard about generic medications being cheaper, but something about the way she said it made me uncomfortable. There was a slight nervousness in her voice that I hadn't heard before. Over the next few days, I started feeling worse. Much worse. The dizziness I had been experiencing became more severe. I would stand up from a chair and feel like the room was spinning. Sometimes I had to grab onto the wall to keep from falling. The fatigue was overwhelming. I would wake up in the morning feeling exhausted, as if I hadn't slept at all. But the most frightening symptom was the confusion. I would walk into a room and forget why I was there. I would start to say something and lose my train of thought mid-sentence. One morning, I couldn't remember how to work my coffee maker, a machine I had been using for 10 years. "These symptoms are very concerning, Mrs. Wilson," Carla said when I mentioned how I was feeling. "Have you told Dr. Peterson about the dizziness and confusion?" "Not yet. I have an appointment next week." You know, confusion and dizziness can be signs of medication toxicity. Sometimes when people get older, their bodies process medications differently. What works fine at 60 might be too strong at 72. She was saying all the right things, using medical terminology that sounded accurate. But my nursing instincts were screaming that something was wrong. "Maybe I should call Dr. Peterson and ask him about these symptoms," I said. "Of course, that's a good idea. But you know how busy doctors are. It might take days to get a call back. In the meantime, maybe I should adjust your medication timing. Sometimes spacing out the doses differently can reduce side effects." Before I could protest, she was already reorganizing my pill dispenser, moving pills from morning to evening, changing the dosages. She worked quickly and confidently, as if she had done this many times before. "There," she said with a bright smile. "This should help reduce the dizziness and confusion. Trust me, Mrs. Wilson. I've been taking care of elderly clients for years. I know how to manage these medication issues." But I didn't get better. I got worse. The next week, when I went to see Dr. Peterson, I could barely walk straight. Carla had insisted on driving me to the appointment, saying she was worried about my condition. Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Peterson said, looking concerned as he reviewed my chart. I'm very worried about these symptoms you're describing. Severe dizziness, confusion, fatigue. These are not normal signs of aging. Have you been taking your medications as prescribed? Yes, exactly as prescribed, I told him. And you haven't missed any doses? Haven't taken extra pills by accident? No, my caregiver Carla makes sure I take everything correctly. Dr. Peterson frowned. Caregiver? I don't recall you mentioning a caregiver before. Carla, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the examination room, spoke up. Doctor, I'm Carla Johnson, Mrs. Wilson's certified nursing assistant. Her daughter Sharon hired me to help manage Mrs. Wilson's care at home. I've been very concerned about her increasing confusion and disorientation. I stared at her in shock. That's not true, I protested weakly. I never forget my medications. Mrs. Wilson, Carla said in a patient, condescending voice. Yesterday you asked me 3 times what day it was. You put salt in your coffee instead of sugar. These are signs of cognitive decline that we need to address. Dr. Peterson looked alarmed. He had known me for 15 years. He knew I was sharp, competent, fully capable of managing my own medications. Mrs. Wilson, I want to run some blood tests, he said. I want to check your medication levels, make sure there's no toxicity. The blood tests came back 3 days later. Dr. Peterson called me personally. Mrs. Wilson, I have very concerning news. Your digoxin levels are dangerously high. At the levels in your blood, you should be experiencing severe toxicity symptoms. This explains everything you've been feeling. But how is that possible? I take exactly the dose you prescribed. That's what worries me. Either you're taking too much medication, or your body has suddenly stopped processing it normally. When I told Carla about the test results, she seemed oddly unsurprised. Oh, Mrs. Wilson, this happens sometimes with elderly patients. Your kidneys probably aren't clearing the medication as efficiently as they used to. The good news is that now we know what's causing your symptoms. But I was a cardiac nurse for 40 years. I knew that dangerously high levels didn't just happen overnight. They built up gradually. And they didn't happen unless someone was taking too much medication. That night after Carla left, I decided to check my medication bottles more carefully. I called the pharmacy. Mrs. Wilson, the pharmacist said. Yes, your caregiver, Carla Johnson, picked up your prescription 2 weeks ago. She showed us a handwritten note from the doctor authorizing a dosage change. A handwritten note, not an official prescription. Carla had doubled my blood pressure medication without my knowledge. She wasn't just making mistakes. She was deliberately poisoning me. I overheard Carla on the phone saying, "Don't worry, the old lady won't last another month. Then Sharon gets the house, and we split the insurance money 50-50. The words hit me like a physical blow. I was standing in my kitchen, having just returned from getting a glass of water from the refrigerator, when I heard Carla's voice coming from the living room. She was talking quietly, but my hearing was still excellent for a woman of 72. Yes, everything is going according to plan, she was saying in a cold, calculating voice I had never heard before. The medication changes are working perfectly. She's getting weaker and more confused every day. I pressed myself against the kitchen wall, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she would hear it. The blood test showed dangerously high levels of digoxin, just like we wanted. Dr. Peterson is already concerned about her cognitive decline. When she dies, it will look completely natural. Heart failure due to medication toxicity in an elderly patient. No one will question it. I felt dizzy, not from the medications this time, but from pure terror. Carla wasn't just accidentally giving me the wrong pills. She was deliberately poisoning me with precise, calculated doses designed to kill me slowly while making it look like natural causes. Sharon is getting impatient, but I told her we have to be careful. If we move too fast, someone might get suspicious. But the way things are going, she'll be dead within 3 to 4 weeks. Then Sharon inherits everything, and I get my $200,000 as promised. $200,000. That was my life insurance payout that Harold had bought for me years ago. Sharon knew about it because she was listed as the beneficiary. But how did Carla know? Trust me, I've done this before. The key is making it look gradual, like normal aging and medication side effects. The confusion, the dizziness, the weakness. Everyone expects elderly people to decline. No one suspects murder. Done this before. The words sent ice through my veins. I wasn't Carla's first victim. She was a serial killer who specialized in murdering elderly patients. The best part is that Sharon hired me through an agency, so there's a paper trail showing this was all legitimate medical care. Even if someone did get suspicious, which they won't, I have documentation showing I was following proper nursing protocols. I heard her footsteps moving toward the kitchen. Quickly, I grabbed a dish towel and pretended to be drying dishes at the sink. "Mrs. Wilson," she said as she entered the kitchen, her voice returning to the sweet, caring tone I was used to. "How are you feeling today? You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I managed to say, though my voice was shaking. "Just a little tired." "Of course you are. Your body is working very hard to process all these medications. Why don't you go rest in your bedroom? I'll finish cleaning up the kitchen." She was trying to get me out of the room, probably so she could continue her phone conversation. I nodded and walked slowly toward my bedroom, but instead of going inside, I stood in the hallway where I could still hear her voice. She made another phone call, this time to Sharon. "It's me," she said. "I just talked to our contact. Everything is on schedule. Your mother's condition is deteriorating exactly as planned." "Good." I heard Sharon's voice through the phone speaker. "How much longer?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 at most. Her digoxin levels are in the toxic range, and her blood pressure medication is causing severe hypotension. The combination is putting enormous stress on her heart. "And you're sure it will look natural?" "Absolutely." Medication toxicity leading to heart failure in a 72-year-old woman with pre-existing cardiac conditions. The medical examiner won't even order an autopsy. It will be listed as natural causes. "What about the will? Did you find out if she changed anything?" "I looked through her papers yesterday while she was napping. The will is still the same. You inherit the house, the life insurance, and all her bank accounts. Total value is about $800,000. $800,000. I had no idea my modest savings in Harold's life insurance had grown to such an amount. But apparently Sharon had calculated it down to the penny. "Perfect. And after she dies, we'll wait a few months before I pay you just to avoid suspicion." "That works for me. Just make sure you don't forget our agreement. 200,000 as discussed." "Don't worry. You'll get your money." I stood in that hallway, listening to my own daughter and her accomplice plan my murder with the cold efficiency of a business transaction. Sharon, the little girl I had raised alone after her father died when she was only 8 years old. The daughter I had supported through college, helped through her divorce, babysat for when she needed time to herself. She was willing to kill me for money. But even more shocking was the realization that this had been planned for months, maybe longer. Sharon's sudden interest in my welfare, her insistence on hiring a caregiver, her frequent visits to check on my health. It had all been part of an elaborate murder plot. Carla hung up the phone, and I heard her moving around the living room. I quickly went into my bedroom and sat on the bed, trying to process what I had just learned. My daughter wanted me dead. The woman I trusted to take care of me was slowly poisoning me. And they were both going to get away with it unless I did something to stop them. But what could I do? If I confronted them, they would deny everything. If I called the police, what proof did I have? A conversation I overheard but didn't record? They could claim I was confused, suffering from dementia caused by medication toxicity. I needed help. I needed someone who would believe me, someone who could investigate them professionally and gather real evidence. That night after Carla left, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop. My hands were shaking as I typed "private investigator" into the search engine. If Sharon and Carla thought they could murder me and get away with it, they were about to learn they had chosen the wrong victim. I was a nurse for 40 years. I knew how to recognize the signs of poisoning. I knew how to document symptoms and gather evidence. And I was about to show them that this old lady wasn't going to die without a fight. That night, I called Robert Martinez, the private investigator I'd found online. I told him, "My daughter is trying to kill me, and I need proof before I end up in a coffin." The phone rang 3 times before a deep, professional voice answered. "Martinez Investigations, this is Robert speaking." I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I held the phone. "Mr. Martinez, my name is Margaret Wilson. I need your help with something very serious. I believe my daughter and my caregiver are trying to murder me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I was afraid he would think I was just another confused elderly woman making paranoid accusations. "Mrs. Wilson, that's a very serious allegation. Can you tell me what makes you believe your life is in danger? I explained everything. The sudden hiring of the caregiver. The medication changes that made me sicker instead of better. The dangerously high digoxin levels in my blood tests. And most importantly, the conversation I had overheard between Carla and Sharon. Robert listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification about dates, names, and specific details. Mrs. Wilson, he said when I finished my story, I specialize in cases involving elder abuse and medical fraud. What you're describing fits a pattern I've seen before. These cases are more common than people realize, and they're often very difficult to prosecute without solid evidence. That's why I need your help. I know what they're planning, but I can't prove it. I understand. Let me ask you a few questions. Do you have any family members or friends who would be willing to support your claims? Anyone who has noticed changes in your health or behavior since the caregiver started working for you? I thought about it. My neighbor, Mrs. Chun, has commented that I look tired and confused lately. And my doctor, Dr. Peterson, was concerned enough about my symptoms to order extensive blood tests. Good. Those could be important witnesses. Now, have you saved any of the medications that you suspect have been tampered with? Yes, I have some of the pills that look different from my usual prescription. Excellent. We can have those analyzed in a laboratory to determine exactly what they contain. Now, here's what I need you to understand, Mrs. Wilson. Investigating this case will require you to continue taking some risks. We need to document their activities, record their conversations, and gather evidence of their criminal behavior. Are you prepared to do that? The question frightened me, but I knew I had no choice. Yes. I'd rather die fighting than die as their victim. All right. I'm going to drive out to meet you tomorrow morning. We need to discuss this in person and start setting up surveillance equipment. But Mrs. Wilson, I need you to promise me something. Don't let them know you're suspicious. Continue acting like you've been acting. Take the medications they give you, but try to avoid swallowing them if possible. Can you do that? I think so. I can pretend to take the pills and then spit them out when they're not looking. Good. And Mrs. Wilson, if you feel like you're in immediate danger, if they try to give you an injection or a large dose of medication, call 911 immediately. Don't worry about maintaining your cover. Your life is more important than gathering evidence. The next morning, Robert Martinez arrived at my house at 10 a.m., exactly when he said he would. He was a man in his mid-50s, average height, with graying hair and kind but intelligent eyes. He wore a simple dark suit and carried a briefcase that looked like it belonged to any professional businessman. Mrs. Wilson, I want you to know that I've been investigating elder abuse cases for 12 years. I've seen situations very similar to yours, and in most cases, we've been able to gather enough evidence to stop the perpetrators and get them prosecuted. Have you ever had a case where the victim's own child was involved? His expression grew sad. Unfortunately, yes. Adult children are actually the most common perpetrators of elder abuse, especially financial abuse. The desire for inheritance money can make people do terrible things to their own parents. He opened his briefcase and showed me several small electronic devices. This is a voice-activated recording device. It's about the size of a quarter and can be hidden almost anywhere. The battery lasts for 72 hours, and it can record up to 40 hours of conversation. He handed me a tiny device that looked like a black button. We're going to place several of these around your house, in areas where you've heard them talking privately. The living room, the kitchen, maybe your bedroom if they've had conversations in there. Won't they notice them? Not if we place them correctly. Behind picture frames, under table edges, inside lampshades. The microphones are extremely sensitive. They'll pick up normal conversation from across a room. What about video cameras? We'll install those too, but they're trickier. Video cameras are larger and more noticeable. We'll put one in your bedroom, disguised as an alarm clock, and another in the living room, hidden inside what looks like a decorative plant. Robert spent the next 2 hours installing the surveillance equipment throughout my house. He showed me how to activate and deactivate the devices, and he gave me a special phone number to call if I needed to reach him immediately. Mrs. Wilson, I also want to run background checks on both Sharon and Carla Johnson. I need their full names, birth dates if you know them, and any other identifying information. I gave him Sharon's information easily, of course. For Carla, I had to look at the paperwork Sharon had given me when she hired her. Carla Ann Johnson, born March 15, 1988. She listed her previous address as Portland, Oregon, and she said she had worked for Golden Years Home Care Agency. Robert made notes in a small leather notebook. I'll run comprehensive background checks on both of them. Criminal history, employment history, credit reports, any civil litigation. If either of them has done this before, we'll find evidence of it. How long will that take? Usually 2 to 3 days for preliminary results. If I find anything suspicious, I'll dig deeper. And what should I do in the meantime? Act normal. Let Carla continue her routine. Let Sharon visit as usual. But document everything. Write down what medications they give you, what time they give them, what they say about your health. Keep a detailed journal hidden somewhere they won't find it. What if they increase the dosages? What if they decide to kill me faster? Robert's expression was serious. Mrs. Wilson, I won't lie to you. There is risk involved in this investigation. But based on what you overheard, they're planning to kill you within 2 to 3 weeks anyway. At least this way, you have a chance to stop them. He handed me a small device that looked like a medical alert pendant. This is a GPS tracker and emergency beacon. If you press and hold the button for 3 seconds, it will send your exact location to my phone and automatically dial 911. Wear it at all times, even when you sleep. After Robert left, I sat in my kitchen feeling both hopeful and terrified. For the first time since discovering the plot against my life, I felt like I had an ally. Someone who believed me and had the skills to help me fight back. But I also knew that the next few days would be the most dangerous of my life. Carla and Sharon had no idea they were being watched and recorded. They would continue their murder plot, and I would have to let them think they were succeeding while secretly gathering the evidence that would destroy them. That afternoon, when Carla arrived for her regular shift, I was ready for her. Detective Martinez discovered that Nurse Carla wasn't even a real nurse. She was Sharon's cellmate from prison, where they both served time for insurance fraud. 3 days after our first meeting, Robert called me with information that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Wilson, I need to see you immediately. I've found some very disturbing information about both Sharon and Carla Johnson. Can I come over this afternoon? Yes, of course. Carla will be here from 2 to 6 p.m., but we can meet in my bedroom and speak quietly. When Robert arrived, his expression was grim. He carried a thick folder filled with documents and photographs. Mrs. Wilson, what I'm about to tell you is worse than we initially suspected. Carla Johnson is not a certified nursing assistant. In fact, she's not licensed to provide any kind of medical care. My hands began to shake. What do you mean? The licensing board has no record of anyone named Carla and Johnson with the birth date and credentials she provided. The license number on her paperwork belongs to a real CNA named Carol and Johnson who died in a car accident 2 years ago in Portland, Oregon. She stole a dead woman's identity? It gets worse. I ran her fingerprints through the criminal database. Her real name is Carla Marie Hendricks. She has an extensive criminal record dating back 15 years. Robert opened the folder and showed me a police booking photo. It was definitely Carla, but she looked younger and harder, with shorter hair and a cold expression. Her first conviction was in 2008 for theft and forgery. She was working as a home health aide and stole $30,000 from an elderly client's bank account. She served 18 months in prison. And after that, she moved to a different state and did it again. In 2011, she was convicted of elder abuse and insurance fraud in Nevada. She convinced an 80-year-old man to change his will, then poisoned him with his own heart medication. She served 4 years that time. I felt sick to my stomach. She's killed before. At least once that we know of. But here's the most shocking part, Mrs. Wilson. Carla and Sharon met in prison in Nevada. They were cellmates for 8 months in 2012. The room seemed to spin around me. Sharon was in prison? For insurance fraud and conspiracy. She helped her then-boyfriend fake a car accident to collect disability payments. She served 2 years and was released in 2014. I never knew. She told me she was working in Portland during those years. She said she was too busy to visit much. They've been planning this for a long time, Mrs. Wilson. I found records showing that Carla moved to this city 6 months ago, right around the time Sharon started visiting you more frequently. Robert showed me more documents. Phone records, financial transactions, apartment leases. They've been in regular contact since they got out of prison. Carla has moved from state to state, always working under false credentials, always targeting elderly people with significant assets. How many people has she killed? We suspect at least 4, possibly more. The Nevada case was the only one where she was caught and prosecuted. But I found suspicious deaths in Oregon, Arizona, and Texas that match her pattern. Elderly people who died of apparent medication overdoses while under the care of unlicensed home health workers. I could hear Carla moving around in my living room, probably preparing my afternoon medications. The woman who was methodically poisoning me had done this to multiple people before me. What about Sharon? Has she been involved in the other murders? I don't think so. The financial records suggest this is their first collaboration since prison. But Mrs. Wilson, that doesn't make her any less dangerous. She's willing to kill her own mother for money. Robert pulled out another set of documents. I also investigated Sharon's current financial situation. She's in serious debt. Credit cards, car loans, a second mortgage on her house. She owes over $200,000. $200,000? But she and Mike both work. How is that possible? Gambling debts. She's been visiting casinos regularly for the past 3 years. Mike filed for divorce last month. He's claiming she forged his signature on loan documents. Everything was falling into place. Sharon's increased visits, her sudden concern for my welfare, her insistence on hiring a caregiver. She wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. So this was all planned from the beginning? Absolutely. They chose you because you live alone, you have substantial assets, and you trust Sharon implicitly. It's the perfect setup for medical murder. Robert showed me photographs from his surveillance of Carla's apartment. I've been watching her for 2 days. She has a medical bag filled with syringes, various medications, and what appears to be poison. She also has detailed notes about your daily routine, your medical conditions, and your financial information. Have you recorded any of their conversations? Several. The devices we planted in your house have captured multiple phone calls between Carla and Sharon. They're discussing accelerating their timeline because they're worried your doctor might become more suspicious about your medication levels. My heart started racing. What do you mean accelerating? They're planning to kill you this weekend. Carla is going to give you a massive overdose of digoxin, combined with a powerful sedative. They want it to look like you accidentally took too many pills because of confusion. This weekend? That's only 3 days away. I know, which is why we need to move quickly. I've already contacted the police. Detective Sarah Martinez, my sister, works in the Elder Abuse Division. She's building a case against them based on the evidence we've gathered. Your sister? Yes. Elder abuse is a family passion, you might say. We've worked together on several cases like this. She'll be here tomorrow morning with arrest warrants. I felt a mixture of relief and terror. But what if they suspect something? What if they try to kill me tonight? That's why I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here tonight, hidden in your garage. If Carla tries anything, I'll intervene immediately. Won't they notice your car? I parked 3 blocks away and walked here. As far as they know, you're alone and vulnerable, just the way they like it. Robert handed me a small recording device. I need you to try to get Carla to talk about her plans. Ask her about your medications. Express concern about how you're feeling. Try to get her to admit that she's been changing your prescriptions. What if she becomes suspicious? Just act confused and worried about your health. That's exactly what they expect from their victims. The key is to make her feel confident that she's succeeding. That evening, Carla prepared my dinner and evening medications just like she had for weeks. But now I knew exactly what she was doing to me. Mrs. Wilson, you seem a little more alert today, she said as she handed me the pills. How are you feeling? Actually, I'm worried about these medications. I've been feeling so sick lately. Maybe we should call Dr. Peterson again. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. Remember, he already adjusted your prescriptions after the last blood test. These new dosages should make you feel better soon. But I feel worse, not better. And sometimes I can't remember taking the pills, so I don't know if I should take more or not. Carla's eyes lit up with interest. You've been forgetting your medications? That's very concerning, Mrs. Wilson. Confusion and memory loss can be dangerous at your age. Maybe you should stay overnight tonight, just to make sure I take everything correctly. That's a wonderful idea. I'll call Sharon and let her know I'm staying over to monitor your condition more closely. Perfect. Both of them would be here when the police arrived in the morning. As I lay in bed that night, listening to Carla making phone calls in my living room, I knew that tomorrow would either be the day I was finally safe, or the day I died that I pretended to get sicker and weaker, while Detective Martinez posed as a night nurse to catch them in the act. The plan Robert and Detective Sarah Martinez developed was both brilliant and dangerous. I would continue to deteriorate, convincing Carla and Sharon that their poison was working perfectly, while Robert gathered the final evidence needed for arrests. Mrs. Wilson, Detective Martinez explained during our meeting the next morning, we need to catch them in the act of administering dangerous medications. Simply having recordings of their conversations won't be enough for conviction. We need video evidence of them actually poisoning you. But what if something goes wrong? What if they give me too much and I actually die? That's why Robert will be monitoring everything in real time from your garage. The moment we see them preparing a dangerous dose, we'll intervene. But we need them to feel confident enough to attempt the final murder. The plan required me to act like I was dying gradually, just as they expected. That afternoon when Carla arrived, I was ready with my performance. "Carla," I said weakly, barely lifting my head from my pillow, "I feel terrible today. Much worse than yesterday." Her eyes lit up with satisfaction. "Oh, Mrs. Wilson, I'm so sorry to hear that. What kind of symptoms are you having?" "I can't catch my breath. My chest feels tight. And I'm so dizzy I can barely stand up. Those sound like serious heart problems. Maybe I should call an ambulance." "No, please. I don't want to go back to the hospital. Can't you just give me something to help me feel better?" "Well, I could adjust your heart medication. Sometimes a slightly higher dose helps with breathing problems." "Perfect." She was offering to increase the very medication that was already poisoning me. "Yes, please. Whatever you think is best." Carla went to my kitchen and returned with my pill organizer. But instead of giving me the usual 2 pills, she handed me 4. "Here, Mrs. Wilson. Take these with plenty of water. They should help your heart pump more effectively." I pretended to swallow the pills, but actually held them under my tongue. As soon as she left the room, I spit them into a tissue and hid them in my nightstand drawer. An hour later, I called out to her in a weak voice. "Carla, I think the medication is helping, but I feel very sleepy. Is that normal?" "Yes, that's perfectly normal. Sleep is the best medicine for someone in your condition. I'll check on you every few hours." That evening, Sharon came to visit, as Carla had promised she would. "Mom, you look awful," she said, though I could see the excitement in her eyes. "How long have you been feeling this sick?" "Since this afternoon. Carla gave me extra heart medication, and I feel much worse." Sharon and Carla exchanged a look that would have been invisible to anyone who didn't know what they were planning. "Mom, maybe you should go to bed early tonight. I'll stay with Carla to make sure you're comfortable." "That would be wonderful, dear. I'm so lucky to have a daughter who cares about me." The words almost choked me, but I needed them to believe I was still the trusting, naive mother they were manipulating. Around midnight, I heard them talking quietly in my living room. The recording devices Robert had installed would capture everything, but I strained to listen anyway. "She's deteriorating faster than expected," Carla was saying. "The increased dosage is really working." "Good. How much longer do you think it will take?" "I'd say 48 hours at most. Tomorrow I'll give her another large dose, and by Friday morning she should be gone." "And it will look natural?" "Absolutely. Heart failure due to medication toxicity. At her age, with her medical history, no one will question it." I felt sick listening to them discuss my death so casually, but I forced myself to stay still and keep breathing normally. At 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom. Someone was trying to be very quiet, but my hardwood floors creaked slightly under their weight. The bedroom door opened slowly. I kept my eyes closed and tried to breathe like someone in deep sleep. "Mrs. Wilson?" Carla whispered. "Are you awake?" I didn't respond. After a moment, I felt her checking my pulse at my wrist, then at my neck. "Perfect," she whispered to herself. "Heart rate is down to 55. Blood pressure is probably dropping too." She was monitoring my vital signs to make sure the poison was working. After she left, I activated the emergency beacon Robert had given me. 3 quick presses meant I was in immediate danger but not yet critical. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated with a text message. "We see everything. Stay strong. Tomorrow we end this." The next day, Thursday, Carla arrived early with a bag I hadn't seen before. "Mrs. Wilson, I brought some special medication to help you feel better. Dr. Peterson called in a new prescription." Dear. Peterson had not called. I was certain of that. "What kind of medication?" "It's an injection, much faster acting than pills. It will help your heart immediately." "An injection? This was it. She was planning to kill me with a lethal injection. I don't like needles, Carla. Can't I just take more pills? Mrs. Wilson, you're very sick. Pills take too long to work. This injection could save your life. She was actually telling me that the injection designed to kill me could save my life. The audacity was breathtaking. Well, if you think it's necessary. Ido. Let me prepare everything. I watched her open her bag and take out a syringe and a small bottle of clear liquid. She drew the liquid into the syringe with practiced efficiency. This might sting a little, but you'll feel better very quickly. She approached my bed with the syringe. I could see Robert's tiny camera hidden in the fake alarm clock, recording everything. Carla, what exactly is in that injection? Medicine to help your heart, Mrs. Wilson. Trust me. She was reaching for my arm when suddenly the bedroom door burst open. Police. Stop what you're doing and step away from the bed. Detective Martinez stood in the doorway with her gun drawn, followed by Robert and two uniformed officers. Carla dropped the syringe and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. You're under arrest for attempted murder and elder abuse, Detective Martinez announced as she handcuffed Carla. At the same moment, I heard shouting from the living room. Sharon was also being arrested. What's in the syringe? Detective Martinez asked one of the officers. We'll have it tested immediately, but based on our investigation, it's probably a lethal dose of potassium chloride or insulin. I had never been so happy to see police officers in my life. When Carla tried to inject me with a lethal dose of insulin, Detective Martinez burst in with cameras rolling and police backup at the ready. The syringe fell to the floor with a sharp clatter as Carla raised her hands in surrender. Her face had gone completely white, and I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized her murder plot had been exposed. You have the right to remain silent, Detective Martinez said as she handcuffed Carla. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I heard similar words being spoken in my living room as officers arrested Sharon. After weeks of pretending to be weak and confused, I finally felt safe enough to sit up in bed. Mrs. Wilson, are you injured? Do you need medical attention? Detective Martinez asked. I don't think so, but I've been taking the wrong medications for weeks. Should I go to the hospital? Yes, we're calling an ambulance now. You need to be examined by doctors who can determine exactly what you've been given and help flush it from your system. Robert entered my bedroom, looking exhausted but relieved. Margaret, you were incredibly brave. The evidence we gathered will put both of them in prison for a very long time. What was in that syringe? We'll have it tested immediately, but based on her previous convictions, it was probably a massive dose of insulin. Enough to kill you within minutes. I shuddered thinking how close I had come to death. If the police had arrived even 5 minutes later, I would have been beyond saving. What happens now? Now we make sure they never hurt anyone again. The next few hours were a blur of paramedics, medical tests, and police interviews. At the hospital, Dr. Peterson was shocked to learn what had been happening to me. Mrs. Wilson, your blood work shows dangerous levels of multiple medications. You've been systematically poisoned for weeks. It's a miracle you're still alive. Will there be any permanent damage? We won't know for sure until we get all these foreign substances out of your system. But you're strong and you caught it in time. I expect you to make a full recovery. The laboratory analysis of Carla's syringe confirmed what Robert had suspected. It contained enough insulin to kill 3 people my size. She had been planning to inject me and claim I had accidentally overdosed on my diabetes medication, even though I wasn't diabetic. 3 days later, I was released from the hospital feeling better than I had in months. The real medications Dr. Peterson prescribed were helping my heart condition, and the poisons Carla had been giving me were finally out of my system. But the legal battle was just beginning. Detective Martinez visited me at home to explain what would happen next. Both Sharon and Carla are being held without bail. They've been charged with attempted murder, elder abuse, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and identity theft. What kind of sentences are they looking at? If convicted on all charges, Carla could get life in prison without parole. She's being charged as a serial killer, because we've linked her to at least 4 other suspicious deaths in different states. And Sharon, 25 to 30 years minimum. The fact that she conspired to murder her own mother will be considered an aggravating factor at sentencing. Over the next several months, more evidence emerged about the scope of their crimes. Police in Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, and Texas reopened investigations into elderly deaths that had occurred while Carla was working in those states. In each case, the pattern was the same. Carla would get hired as a caregiver under a false identity, slowly poison her elderly clients with their own medications, and steal their money while they were dying. The investigation also revealed that Sharon had been planning this for over 2 years. Phone records showed regular contact between her and Carla since Sharon's divorce proceedings began. She was desperate, Robert explained to me. Her gambling debts were enormous, and her ex-husband was demanding half of everything she owned. She saw your inheritance as her only way out of financial ruin. The trial began 8 months later. The courthouse was packed with reporters and family members of Carla's other victims. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case using the recordings from my house, the video evidence, the laboratory analysis of the medications, and testimony from experts in toxicology and elder abuse. Carla's defense attorney tried to claim she was just following Sharon's instructions, that she didn't really understand what she was doing. But the evidence of her previous convictions made that impossible to believe. Sharon's lawyer argued that she had been manipulated by Carla, that she never really intended for me to die. But the recordings of their phone conversations proved otherwise. They had planned my murder in cold, calculating detail. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. At the sentencing hearing, I was given the opportunity to address both women before they were sent to prison. Sharon, I said, looking directly at my daughter, I raised you to be better than this. I gave you everything I had, and you repaid me by trying to murder me. I will never understand how you could value money more than your own mother's life. Sharon was crying, but I felt no sympathy for her. She had made her choice when she decided to kill me. Carla, you are a predator who targets the most vulnerable people in our society. You stole not just money, but lives. You robbed families of precious time with their loved ones. You deserve every day you'll spend in prison. The judge sentenced Carla to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She would die behind bars, never again able to hurt an elderly person. Sharon received 30 years in prison. She would be 75 years old when she was eligible for parole, assuming she lived that long. As I watched them being led away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that they could never hurt me or anyone else again. Sadness that my own daughter had chosen this path. And determination to make sure other elderly people wouldn't suffer the same fate. The trial. Prosecutors called it one of the most calculated medical murders they'd ever prosecuted. Sharon got 25 years, and Carla got life without parole. The courtroom was packed on the day of sentencing. I sat in the front row, surrounded by family members of Carla's other victims. Some had flown in from Nevada, Oregon, and Arizona to finally see justice for their loved ones who had been murdered by this woman. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case. They played the recordings Robert had made of Sharon and Carla planning my death. They showed the video footage of Carla attempting to inject me with the lethal dose of insulin. They presented laboratory evidence proving that my medications had been systematically replaced with dangerous substances. Your Honor, the prosecutor said during his closing arguments, this was not a crime of passion or a moment of poor judgment. This was a calculated, premeditated murder plot that took months to plan and execute. The defendants showed no mercy for their elderly victim, and they deserve none from this court. Carla's defense attorney tried desperately to save her from a life sentence. Your Honor, my client was manipulated by Sharon Wilson, who used her desperation and criminal history to convince her to participate in this scheme. Carla Hendricks is not the mastermind here. But the evidence told a different story. Phone records showed that Carla had initiated most of the conversations about killing me. She was the one with experience in medical murder. She was the one who knew exactly which drugs to use and how much to give. Sharon's lawyer painted her as a loving daughter who had been corrupted by financial desperation. Your Honor, my client never intended for her mother to die. She was drowning in debt and saw no other way out. She was manipulated by a serial killer who had done this before. The judge listened to both defense arguments with a stone face. When it was time for sentencing, his words were harsh and final. Carla Hendricks, you are a predator who has spent years targeting the most vulnerable members of our society. You have shown no remorse for your crimes and no regard for human life. The evidence shows that you have murdered at least 4 elderly people and attempted to murder Mrs. Margaret Wilson. I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Carla showed no emotion as she was sentenced to die behind bars. She stared straight ahead, her face blank and cold. Sharon Wilson, you have betrayed the most sacred bond that exists in human society. The bond between parent and child. You conspired to murder the woman who gave you life, who raised you, who supported you financially for decades. Your greed and selfishness have no limits. I hereby sentence you to 30 years in prison. Sharon broke down crying as she heard her sentence. She turned to look at me, her face streaked with tears. Mom, I'm sorry, she mouthed silently. But I felt no sympathy for her. She had made her choice when she decided my life was worth less than her financial problems. After the sentencing, Detective Sarah Martinez approached me in the courthouse hallway. Mrs. Wilson, I want you to know that your courage has helped us solve 4 other murder cases. Because of the evidence we gathered in your case, we were able to reopen investigations in Nevada, Oregon, Arizona, and Texas. Families who thought their loved ones died of natural causes now have answers. Will there be more trials? Probably. But Carla will never see the outside of a prison cell again. So these additional convictions are mainly for the family's closure. Robert Martinez joined us in the hallway. He had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, and I knew I would be forever grateful to him. Margaret, what are you planning to do now? You've been through an incredible trauma. I'm planning to make sure this never happens to anyone else. 6 months later, I established the Margaret Wilson Foundation for Elder Protection. We provide free services to elderly people who suspect they're being abused or exploited by their caregivers. The foundation offers private investigative services, legal assistance, and educational programs about recognizing the signs of elder abuse. We work closely with law enforcement agencies across the country to identify and prosecute people who target elderly victims. In our first year, we helped expose 12 different cases of elder abuse. We saved the lives of 8 elderly people who were being slowly poisoned by their caregivers. We recovered over $2 million that had been stolen from elderly victims. Robert Martinez became the foundation's chief investigator. His expertise in elder abuse cases has been invaluable in training other investigators and law enforcement officers. We also lobbied for stronger background check requirements for home health care workers. The laws we helped pass require fingerprint-based criminal background checks and regular license verifications for anyone providing medical care to elderly people in their homes. Dr. Peterson became one of our medical advisors. He now trains other doctors to recognize the signs of medication tampering and elder abuse. He has identified and reported 6 cases of suspected elder abuse to law enforcement in the past 2 years. The foundation publishes educational materials for elderly people and their families. We teach them how to verify caregiver credentials, how to recognize suspicious behavior, and when to call for help. Most importantly, we provide a 24-hour hotline for elderly people who suspect they're being abused. Our trained counselors can provide immediate safety planning and connect callers with local resources. 3 years after my near-death experience, I received a letter from an elderly woman in Florida. Her daughter-in-law had been stealing her prescription medications and selling them. The woman called our hotline, and we connected her with a local private investigator who gathered evidence of the theft. Mrs. Wilson, she wrote, your foundation saved my life. If I hadn't learned about the signs of elder abuse from your educational materials, I might have died from medication withdrawal. Thank you for turning your terrible experience into something that helps other people. Letters like that one remind me why I survived Sharon and Carla's murder plot. I was meant to live so I could protect other elderly people from predators who see us as easy targets. Today at 75, I'm healthier and happier than I've been in years. I have a purpose that gives meaning to every day. I have the satisfaction of knowing that my suffering has prevented other people from experiencing the same betrayal and fear. Sharon will be eligible for parole when she's 70 years old, if she lives that long. Carla will die in prison. And I will continue fighting to protect elderly people until the day I die naturally in my own bed, surrounded by people who truly love me. Today at 75, I run Margaret's Guardian Angels, an organization that has saved 43 elderly people from caregiver fraud. And I have one message. Trust your instincts because they might save your life. 3 years have passed since that terrible night when Carla tried to kill me with that lethal injection. Today, as I sit in my office at the Margaret Wilson Foundation for Elder Protection, I can hardly believe how much my life has changed. Our foundation now operates in 12 states, with a staff of 37 dedicated professionals. We have a 24-hour hotline that receives an average of 43 calls per week from elderly people who suspect they're being abused or exploited. Robert Martinez is still our chief investigator, and his expertise has been invaluable in training law enforcement officers across the country. Last month, he testified before Congress about the growing epidemic of elder abuse and the need for stronger federal legislation. "Margaret," he said during our weekly staff meeting, "I never imagined when I first met you that we would build something this important. Your courage has literally saved dozens of lives." The statistics are both heartbreaking and encouraging. In our first 3 years of operation, we have identified and stopped 43 cases of elder abuse. We've helped recover over $4 million that was stolen from elderly victims. We've seen 26 caregivers arrested and convicted for crimes against their elderly clients. But the number that matters most to me is 0. That's how many elderly people have died from caregiver abuse in cases where our foundation was involved. Every person we've helped is still alive today. Last week, I received a phone call that reminded me why this work is so important. "Mrs. Wilson, this is Dorothy Martinez from Phoenix, Arizona. I'm 81 years old, and I think my grandson is trying to kill me." I listened as Dorothy explained that her grandson had moved in with her 6 months earlier, claiming he wanted to help her around the house. But instead of helping, he had been stealing her medications and replacing them with pills that made her feel sick and confused. "I saw your television interview last month," Dorothy said. "You talked about trusting your instincts when something doesn't feel right. Well, my instincts are screaming that something is very wrong." Within 24 hours, we had connected Dorothy with a local private investigator who specialized in elder abuse cases. Within a week, we had documented evidence of medication tampering and financial theft. Within 2 weeks, her grandson was arrested and charged with elder abuse and fraud. Dorothy is now safe and healthy, living independently in her own home with proper support services. Her story is one of 43 similar victories we've achieved since the foundation began. But for every success story, we know there are countless other elderly people who are suffering in silence, afraid to speak up because they don't want to get their family members in trouble, or because they're too embarrassed to admit they're being victimized. That's why education is such a critical part of our mission. We've developed educational materials that are distributed through senior centers, hospitals, and doctors' offices across the country. We teach elderly people how to recognize the warning signs of caregiver abuse and what to do if they suspect they're being victimized. The warning signs include sudden changes in medication that make you feel worse instead of better, caregivers who are overly interested in your financial situation, isolation from friends and family members, and unexplained changes to legal documents like wills or bank account information. We also train healthcare professionals to recognize these signs in their elderly patients. Dr. Peterson has become one of our most effective advocates, speaking at medical conferences and training sessions about the importance of screening elderly patients for potential abuse. "Margaret's case opened my eyes to how sophisticated these predators can be," Dr. Peterson told a group of emergency room doctors last month. "If I hadn't known her for 15 years, I might have believed that her symptoms were just normal aging combined with medication side effects. Now I ask much more detailed questions when elderly patients present with confusion or medication toxicity." The foundation has also been instrumental in changing laws and regulations in several states. We successfully lobbied for legislation requiring enhanced background checks for anyone providing in-home medical care to elderly people. We helped establish mandatory reporting requirements for healthcare providers who suspect elder abuse. Most importantly, we've created a network of professionals who are trained to recognize and investigate elder abuse cases. Our investigators work with local law enforcement agencies to build criminal cases against perpetrators, while our victim advocates help elderly people navigate the legal system and access support services. 6 months ago, I was invited to speak at a national conference on elder abuse prevention. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of 500 law enforcement officers, healthcare providers, and victim advocates, I thought about how different my life might have been if I hadn't trusted my instincts about Carla and Sharon. Elder abuse is often called a hidden crime because it happens behind closed doors, perpetrated by people the victims trust, I told the audience. But it doesn't have to stay hidden. Every healthcare provider, every neighbor, every family member can learn to recognize the signs and take action to protect vulnerable elderly people. After my speech, a young police officer approached me. "Mrs. Wilson, my grandmother was murdered by her caregiver 3 years ago. The case was never prosecuted because we didn't have enough evidence. If your foundation had existed then, she might still be alive today." Stories like that one motivate me to continue this work, even when it's emotionally difficult and physically exhausting. At 75, I work longer hours than I did when I was 50, but I've never felt more fulfilled or purposeful. My personal life has also changed dramatically. I've developed friendships with other elderly people who have survived abuse, and we support each other through the ongoing healing process. I've also become close with several of the investigators and advocates who work for the foundation. Most surprisingly, I've found love again. Harold Martinez, Robert's older brother, is a retired teacher who volunteers with our foundation. He helps develop educational materials and coordinates our speakers bureau. We've been dating for 18 months now, and he's asked me to marry him. At 75, I never expected to fall in love again. But Harold understands my mission and supports my work completely. He also makes me laugh, which I hadn't done nearly enough of in the years since Harold's death. "You've turned your worst nightmare into something beautiful," he told me last week. "You've saved so many lives and brought justice to so many families. I'm proud to stand beside you in this work." As I finish writing this story, I want to leave you with the most important message I can share. If you're an elderly person reading this, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong with your caregiver, if your medications are making you sicker, if someone is pressuring you to change your will or sign financial documents, speak up. Call our hotline. Talk to your doctor. Contact a trusted friend or family member. You are not powerless. You are not alone. And you deserve to live your remaining years with dignity, safety, and respect. Remember, predators count on your silence. Don't give them that gift.